likely on YouTube when I'm done here, and assuming I can get it worked out, we'll send everybody who signed up a link just so you guys have it. So if you have to leave or anything like that, hopefully you can catch the rest of it, and hopefully you find this information useful. So I'll go ahead and start off with who I am. My name's Mark Phillip. I work for Studica. I'm an application engineer. Studica sells software to educational clients like high schools and colleges and things like that, and we're a partner with Unity, with Unity Technologies, and we also sell the Unity 3D game engine. What we want to talk about today is specifically the whole thing with STEM education and game design, and how game design fits with STEM education, and why it's something that's beneficial for teachers to start teaching students, and what that means for the future. And some of you are probably already involved in game design or are teachers already, and you probably know some of this information, but oftentimes I get people who may not be. So I'll kind of introduce sort of where the game industry is at currently. The ESRB, which is who gives me these numbers here, in 2009 estimated the game industry was pulling in about $10.5 billion of revenue. Now this is only the entertainment software industry. That means like computer games, video games, like Call of Duty and things like that. We're not talking about, other applications of game design, which goes into the whole gamification concept, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. But in 2009, the industry was pulling in $10.5 billion of revenue, and 67% of U.S. households play video games or otherwise own some sort of video game console. When you do the math on that, according to the I forget which government agency, the Census Bureau. When you do the math on that, it's like 100 million or 150 million or so homes that equate to how many people are playing video games. So there's quite a lot now. It's become a very big mainstream force, and these numbers are all from 2009. Last I checked, in 2012, they were estimating that the game industry was going to surpass the box office, ticket sales of Hollywood at somewhere around $13 billion, I think. As far as jobs, in 2009, there was over 250,000 people employed in entertainment software, and they're expecting now over 500,000 in 2013. So it's becoming more and more expansive. They're getting more and more people involved. It's becoming a big trade that is no longer niche, that's no longer underpaid. People are actually getting paid very well in the game industry, and there's more and more jobs opening up. So for students and young people, say in high school or even into college, it's no longer something that you're not really guaranteed work with when you get out, Knowing these skills now teaches you concepts in computer science down to 3D modeling and even into mathematics like physics and sometimes engineering. So it's a wide skill set that benefits your students greatly by learning it. That's just the industry. Real quick numbers on the industry. Now, again, that was only entertainment software. We're not talking about what was gamification. Now, gamification, gamification is basically taking game design methodology and concepts and applying that to other disciplines outside of, say, entertainment software. So instead of, making a video game with your game design knowledge, you're instead utilizing what you know about game design to somehow incentivize or provide some sort of service or good in a different way, but you use that same kind of methodology. And one example of this was Green Giant, the vegetable distributor, the Green Giant. They did a campaign a couple years back where they offered Farmville points to people who purchased their products. And for those who may not know, Farmville is a social media game that was first on Facebook, where you build a farm and tend to your crops and everything like that. It was a very big game, and the guys who made it made a lot of money off it, actually. And what Green Giant did was they worked with Farmville to offer Farmville points, which is like cash you can use in Farmville to buy items in the game that people like or that people want. And so whenever you would buy, say, a can of lima beans from Green Giant, you would get a code that you could redeem on Farmville that would give you so many points. for your Farmville cash you could use in game. Green Giant actually saw a pretty big surge of people purchasing their product because of this, and the people who, well, it raised their brand awareness. And when Saatchi and Saatchi here conducted a study of different major brands and brand awareness, and also what consumers thought of their advertising, they found out that Green Giant was pretty much topping everybody on the positive spectrum. People really took to that kind of idea. And I wouldn't say that's a direct example of gamification. I'll get to that right after this, but it's kind of in the same ballpark. They used a creative way of marketing basically that involved games and involved that kind of incentive above and beyond just purchasing, say, lima beans. You're also getting something and kind of being rewarded for it, which is a very classic mechanic in video games. And you see that especially in things like MMORPGs like World of Warcraft. It was always that matter of keeping you hooked by giving you these incentives and giving you rewards all the time for doing something. And gamification is becoming a very big thing as game engines like Unity are coming around, and it's becoming very easy for people to utilize game engines within the things that they do. For example, in architecture, we're starting to see a lot more firms, and this was an example. This is running the Unity web player on Arc Virtual's website, and this guy is basically an architect who does a lot of work with Revit and AutoCAD and things like that. But he started adopting Unity 3D recently, and what he can do is bring an FBX model of his, say his Revit, a model he creates in Revit, with all the accurate dimensions and all the floor plans and everything he wants, even down to the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And he can bring it into Unity, and he can actually program a movable character. So right now I'm using WASD to move around. And this is very primitive, but you can see where there's a script where if I walk near this door, it opens. That's something you can't normally do in software like Revit or AutoCAD. These are things that you can only do with an engine that allows you to. You can't create character controllers in the CAD software, but this allows me to actually walk around and do things within the environment. And he also scripted this where I can click E against the wall and change the material and get a feel for what it looks like. One of my favorite examples of this was from an architecture group called Tota Group, but they're having some web issues today. I wasn't able to access their demonstration, but they did a really good job. They had a whole house, like a mansion sort of thing, where you could go in, you can change like what kind of sofa you have, what kind of pillows you're using, and it was a third-person view rather than a first-person. So you're actually walking around with like a female character, and you could do all these things. So this is just one example also of gamification where we're starting to see things like first-person controllers that are normally a concept in like Call of Duty or you like Half-Life or something, and you're seeing these now come into these different sectors to, an architect would typically show this off to a client or give them this and allow them to come in and customize the materials they want on their walls, or, say, I want this different, I want that different. And so it's becoming a very useful thing in architecture, and we're getting a lot more interest from people who have CAD programs at school and things like that. We're getting a lot more interest from them in things like Unity because they want to be able to engage this kind of interactive walkthrough with their models, because there's a lot more people in the private sector actually doing it, so it's becoming more of an industry standard practice. So that's another example of gamification, and probably the best example of gamification is what I just brought up on my screen here. This is called Foldit. Now this was a program that was written by the University of Washington Center for Game Design, and it was in a collaboration with the University of Washington, I think biochem department. And this program made front page news a couple of years back, because what this does is it allows users to sign up, and all it says is a protein folding software. And what it encourages you to do is find the most efficient way to create a protein or bundle a protein up based on actual real world chemistry and the physics of this whole thing. Now this made front page news because a couple of years ago, I think there's some 500,000 people registered for this game. I think some years ago, what ended up happening was they introduced these kinds of puzzles every month or so, where they ask everybody to try and figure out what the protein structure is for an actual like unknown protein that biochemists and medical science or whoever has not yet found out. And a couple of years back, a group of people who played this game ended up folding a protein into the shape of a well-known HIV strain that had not been discovered yet. They didn't quite know what the actual shape of the protein was, and through this game, the users were able to fold the protein into the right shape, and upon further analysis by the biochemists, they actually determined that they found this specific strain of HIV that they hadn't been able to determine before. So it was actually kind of cool, and it was the first time that people really realize that games could be applied to more than just entertainment. Yeah, this is a puzzle game and you get rewarded points for making the most efficient structure. I'm still failing here. It's not passing me because I'm really bad at this, I guess. But you get the idea. It was the first time that really gamification came to the forefront, and people said, well, hey, if we can get really creative with game design, we could probably use this kind of methodology for more than just blowing people away in a first-person shooter. So it stepped more into that realm now, and we're starting to see more research, especially in the sciences and things like that, are starting to use game design and methodology such as this program Foldit to encourage people to get in there and discover new things or help contribute to science, especially even if you're not a scientist. I'm not a scientist by trade. I don't have a degree or anything, but if I felt like, I could play Foldit for 6 hours a day or something, who knows, I might contribute to some kind of research going on at University of Washington. So I always thought that was a really cool thing, and that was a good example of gamification. So we're seeing this happen a lot more across multiple sectors, and so that's why I say gaming or game design now is no longer just to create pieces of entertainment. You can use it in so many disciplines, down to marketing, down to architecture, down to research. I mean, as long as you're creative, you could pretty much figure any way to utilize game design methodology in a different capacity than just entertainment. So, so why is that important? Well, it's important because it means that there's a lot more versatility in knowing game design. And I say this because I'm assuming a lot of you are educators. Sorry, somebody's asking me for control. I'm assuming a lot of you are educators, and many of you are probably already in game design in some capacity, and you realize that young people especially seem to be really engaged by this sort of curriculum. I know I was when I was in high school. I took a computer science course because I wanted to make games. Every single person in my class was taking that class because they wanted to make video games. Nobody in there was saying, I want to make the next Facebook. Nobody was saying, I want to make the next Windows or OS X. Everybody wanted to make video games. And maybe that's really short-sighted, but the fact is a lot of young people nowadays grew up playing tons of games. People really like them. It's kind of the same as, say, music or movies. It's these kinds of industries that people are really appeal to people because it's not only creative, but it's also scientific in a way, which goes into my whole tirade or rant about STEM education here. The first time I did this webinar, I had somebody ask me, how does somebody mentioned that their administrators, the guys making the calls with the budget at their high school, were not willing to fund a game design curriculum because they said it wasn't STEM. Everybody's focusing on STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and some people even go as far as saying STEAM, which includes art in the mix. And I always argue that game design is all of those things. I don't see how you can say game design is not STEM because, first of all, the science is there. You got computer science. You're doing programming, all over the place when you're talking about game design. I'm looking at one of my Unity scripts here, and this is very simple, but to make any kind of game, you have to know the programming. You have to get engaged in computer science. And knowing computer science is something that, as we come into the future and everything's more and more digital, it's absurd not to be teaching people computer science. It's something absolutely everybody's going to need to know, or at least should have some capacity of knowing. You don't have to be an expert programmer, but it's such a valuable skill. And game design is so involved with computer science that if you were to get involved in a game design curriculum and you have good teachers and you have good tools at your disposal and you're a student, there's no way you can't adapt or you can't grab onto some of these concepts that are in computer science and programming. As far as technology in the STEM scope, I mean, I don't really need to explain that. Game design is heavily integrated with technology. When you get down to computer hardware, everything like that, I mean, you just look at what people have done with the app stores on, on the the Apple App Store, the Android marketplace, and you just see how people have gotten so clever with the use of the new touchscreen technology and the accelerometers and everything. The engineering side is probably the hardest thing to argue, but I always say if you're trying to make a game that is, semi-realistic or at least rooted in real-world physics and things like that, that you have to have a certain level of understanding about engineering. Say if you want to have a building get destroyed in your game, or you want like a wall to collapse, you want to know exactly how that wall, depending on the force of whatever action is destroying that wall, you want to know how it's going to crumble, and you want to know if that's going to leave the building standing or if it's going to crumble the whole building down. I always find concepts like that, and while that's more high-end game design, you could still get into that and say, well, there is a certain level of engineering involved, and you could even go down to electrical engineering if you want, understanding how the assembly language communicates with the hardware and things like that gets into electrical engineering. So that's the engineering side. Mathematics is self-explanatory. Computer science is so heavily involved with mathematics that you end up learning calculus, trig, and linear algebra and equations and physics just because you're trying to make a game. So to say STEM is not, or to say game design is not STEM education is to me absurd. And if you have any administrators that are telling you they can't afford a game design curriculum and you're trying to get one, just argue what I just said. Just say, come on, I mean that's absurd. STEM is all over the place in game design. You could even go into the STEAM, the art aspect of it, because you have to have 3D models or 2D animations. So all of those things are met here. So to me, it's kind of the panacea of STEM, and hopefully more people will adopt it in the future. But one of the tools we're seeing a lot of schools starting to use are a lot of these game engines, be it the Unreal game engine or say Game Salad for 2D. Or Unity 3D for 3D work. And what I'm going to show is more of the Unity 3D side of things, because that's what I got on my computer. And Unity 3D up front is a 3D game engine. What a game engine is basically, some of you probably already know this, a game engine is basically something that already has all the fundamentals you need in your program, and you basically use these tools to create a game out of it. And so traditionally, before the access to all these cheap game engines like Unity, you used to just code everything in something like this. And this is mono developed. This is Unity's code editor. You used to build the whole thing from the ground up with just thousands and thousands of lines of code. And that's very daunting and it's very intimidating, especially to somebody who's young, who may not be well initiated in computer science. It's very hard to grab onto these kinds of concepts initially and try and make a whole game out of it. But with Unity, all that groundwork's laid out for you. They've already taken care of collision data and gravity and inertia and the physics of it, and even down to how do objects interact within the world. So all I really have to do is drag and drop stuff or create something from the ground up very simply. And to show this off a bit, the way Unity works is they have what are called game objects. Game objects, if I create an empty game object and zoom up on it here, sorry, is not the capsule or the square. All this is an XYZ transform, which many of you who have used 3D modeling software are probably familiar with this. All this tells you is that there's a space in XYZ, and all this is just an empty space. But in Unity on the right side here, I have my inspector, and I can add components to this and build up something from pretty much nothing. So I can add mesh filters and say a mesh renderer, and for my filter I'll just do like this little bar, and then my mesh render, I'll give that a material, and it will just be something gray. And now if I look at my game object, it's taken on this rectangular gray shape, and all I did was I had an empty space, and then I just started adding components onto it. So that's the way Unity works in general. That's pretty much the fundamental of Unity, is that you have game objects, and game objects can be anything you want them to within the scope of Unity. You can go on further to add scripts and things to this. If I take a look at some of the game objects I've already had here, I have this cylinder, which if I look at my inspector, I'll collapse some of these. I'm looking at the first person controller, so I'm looking at the whole thing. This is what they call a prefab. It's got graphics component and it's got a camera component to it, and that makes up the whole prefab. If I look at my graphics, it's the same thing. It's just a capsule with a normal diffused material on it. And then it has a main camera associated with it, and that camera has a spawn point associated with it in front of it. And I use that spawn point for executing where a fireball comes out of on my character. If I hit run real quick, I'm able to look around. Well, there's my box floating in the air. I'm able to look around with my capsule using WASD. I can jump, and I've scripted it so if I left click, I shoot out a fireball, and when that fireball collides, it explodes and it deletes its own instance on the left. If you see my hierarchy over here, you'll see fireballs get created as I spam it, and so those objects are being made, and then I have them scripted to destroy themselves from the entire system so we don't get lagged out. And I have a box here. If I shoot it, it goes flying. It's got some physics associated with it because I gave it a rubber material, so it kind of rolls around, and I have a script on it that is supposed to be getting health, and it's supposed to explode at 0 health, but it generates health over time. So yeah, if I hit it up front, it just explodes ridiculously large and then destroys itself. So if I look at my first person controller, we can see kind of what I did. In the inspector here, we give it a character controller, which allows us to move it around. It also gives it collision. That's what this little green wireframe is. That means that our capsule has a collision detector on it, so that when I touch the ground here, it doesn't fall through the earth. When I first used Unity, I found the collision aspect to be awesome because I've tried programming collision data when I was in high school, and it just blew my mind. I was beyond confused. I know some of you probably have no problem doing it, but you know, I had a lot of trouble with it. I thought it was cool that there was like a one-click solution for collision data in this, and with Unity, it allows you to utilize that collision within the scripting. And so if I check out kind of what I'm doing here on my scripts, I have the mouse look script, which allows me to move around with my mouse, and then I have a character motor script which determines, you know, the speed at which I move when I do WAS or D, you know, whether or not I, you know, how fast I fall, how fast I can jump, how many units I can move, etc. And I have an input controller and then a projectile script, which is pretty much what I'm using to tell that fireball to shoot out from my spawn point location. Now, as far as the scripting goes in Unity, you don't, again, what I was saying was that you don't have to do all the hardcore ground up programming in Unity. You only really have to work with what they give you and what's within your scene. I'm trying to open up a good script to check out here. Let's see, you got projectile, health. Let me check out this one. So MonoDevelop is the code editor that comes with Unity. You could use really any code editor you want, where you like code blocks or something else. Unity utilizes, well, there's 3 different languages you can use. You can do JavaScript, C#, or Boo. Now it's important to note that the JavaScript in Unity is very heavily modified. It's what the Unity calls Unity script. And you can kind of see that if you look at this. Anybody who's seen JavaScript before knows that some of these things just don't exist in normal Java, like invoke repeating, audio clip. Some of these are classes and methods that are created by Unity that you use within your software. So the fact that I have created my capsule, that script I was looking at with a health script, which I have attached to my box here, which we can see right here. The fact that this box is a rigid body gives it certain collision properties that I can work with. And just as an example of some Unity specific scripts, you can kind of see my if statement here is collision.rigidbody. That allows me to utilize the actual collision box that's on my cube there and do something with it. So I can actually use that as like a Boolean statement in my if statement to conduct, to carry out a certain function. So again, this is heavily modified script. The only thing related to JavaScript really is more or less the syntax. There's still some things like defining variables, up here, and then your functions, obviously. But other than that, you're mostly using Unity terminology to actually make this happen. And I know that seems daunting at first, but Unity does a very good job of including API references and giving you real-world examples. So if you're on Unity's website, or even when you install the software, you get this on your computer, you have you can go to their API, and they have every single thing here on the left, like every single thing that you can possibly think of. And if you click on them, it gives you every single variable, every single function associated with it, all the inherited variables. They even give you examples of what it's used for, and they give you code blocks so you can kind of get an idea what you're doing. When I first started learning Unity, it probably took me maybe 2 days to kind of really get the hang of this, because it was so easy to just hop on their web page and just figure out exactly what all these different classes and functions are doing. So it's very quick, and this is a great way to learn programming for students who may otherwise not already be engaged, because Unity is very drag and drop. It's very simple to add assets in here. I have some of my 3D models from Maya. There's very primitive stuff, but I can literally just drag and drop that in here, and I could start adding components to that however I want to deem necessary. I could even bake out animations in Maya. This is the normal human rig that comes as one of Maya's projects. I'm not a good animator or 3D modeler, so I decided I would just use one Autodesk did. I export this pretty much straight out as an FBX file, and if I made any animations, you can bake those out as well, and you can include them in Unity, and you can certain scripts, you can script it in such a way that you can animate your characters based on their skeleton structures and everything like that. So Unity is also a good way to engage students with, students, if you have like a 3D modeling curriculum or a 3D design curriculum, you could have students who work on the game side of things, like all the scripting and all the dragging and dropping assets and stuff into Unity. You could have the 3D modeling students work with them, creating assets for them, and they would just export FBX files, hand them to the Unity students, and then they just literally drag and drop this into their scene, and they start saying, I want to add a physics component and create a mesh collider and do this and that. I'm going to add some scripts to them. And it's very simple, it's very easy, and it's very straightforward. As far as scripting goes, get back to this real quick. I tend, from what I've seen, it sounds like most people are scripting in Unity with either the JavaScript or the C#. There's not many people doing Boo. I'm assuming that most people are using C#, since that seems to kind of be the standard these days, or at least especially with apps and everything like that. But I found the JavaScript to be pretty easy to adapt to. So you can bring models straight in from Unity, like an FBX file, straight in from Maya or even 3ds Max. Like I have this big old building, which is one of the default projects that you make in Max, and that is ridiculously large, but I can scale that down. So I can bring that right into Unity from pretty much drag and drop. I'd already exported this as an FBX file, but if I was in Max, you would literally export this as FBX. and you could just drag and drop the file from your desktop right into the Unity viewer here, and it will throw it in there for you. And when you import these items, you're given options over here on the right, like generating colliders, optimizing your meshes, swapping UVs. You can generate unique light map UVs. You can also create your own light maps in Maya or Max or wherever you want to do it, and you can import those into Unity and use those as well. But Unity Pro also has its own light mapping functionality built into it, so you can also do it that way. When you generate colliders, it will basically create a mesh collider for you, and what that should allow me to do is, if this turned out right, if I shoot this wall, yeah, so my bullet or my fireballs explode when they touch the wall because I imported this with colliders by default. I didn't even have to do anything to that. I just told it to do it on its own, and it did it. It imports materials if you want it to. The other thing I wanted to look at was, I had mentioned earlier that architects are starting to use Unity for doing more in-depth walkthroughs, and this program is Revit. This is one of the standards for architecture and design now in the industry, up there with AutoCAD. It's also by Autodesk. I can take this model out of Revit architecture, and this is this is one of their sample models. Some of you might recognize if you've used the software. You can export this straight out from Revit, and I can throw this right into Unity, which I've already done, so I'll just go ahead and grab it out here. This is an FBX file. Now you'll notice there's one issue when I bring this in, and it's that the materials don't show up proper. Now this is actually a shortfall with the newest Autodesk material libraries. Apparently before version, I think 2011, everything used to import fine, but I guess Unity is not quite fully integrated yet with the new material libraries from Autodesk. But the workaround to that is basically bringing this into 3ds Max, making sure that your materials are all proper, then exporting from 3ds Max rather than Revit, and that should maintain your materials. But you're able to bring in these sorts of buildings, and if I scale this up a bit, whoa, that's more than a bit. And say I kill off that door, and if I move my first-person controller kind of over here, you can kind of get the idea of how I can. I think I still need this guy to be bigger. I play my game. I'm on my first-person controller here. Well, I'm on top of the house. Jump down. Oh, I'm too tall for it. But I can walk through this door and kind of explore around the house a bit and get the idea. And that's how that guy in the over on this thing, that's pretty much what he did. He imported this model from Revit, and then he scripted certain things and said he added a script to these doors that told him whenever my character controller is within so much of a distance, it will automatically open. Because whenever you bring these things into Unity, well, I already deleted that door. Let me look at like this side door. If I select this door specifically, you can see just like every other item, it has components attached to it that I would be able to manipulate. And so if I wanted, I could add a component to this and say add a certain script that would say open this door when I get close enough. I don't have one that does that, so I can't exactly do it right here, but hopefully you get the idea about that. So I was just looking at something. The other cool thing with Unity is, these are all assets that I had pretty much created from 3ds Max and things like that. However, me being not a very good designer, if I wanted to make a game and I want it to look decent, and I don't have any friends or anybody, I'm on low budget, I can't afford to pay people who know what they're doing with 3D models, I can always go to the Unity Asset Store. And the Asset Store is pretty much, think of like the App Store from Apple, except it's for Unity assets. And what this is basically just a giant database of different things that you can purchase for Unity. Some of them are free, like these terrain assets are provided by Unity that you can use on your terrains within the software. But if I look at this, say, mobile edition top-down assets, this seems to be rated pretty high. you can see a list of the different things that you get with it. And this guy seemed to do a kind of isometric sort of RPG looking feel with these items. And so, if I like how these look and I say, well, I want to make a game, I think these will work for what I want to do, I could say buy this for $65. And then I get all those assets and they just pop right into Unity and I can start using them. And you can see screenshots of kind of how they've used them before. Actually, it looks pretty good. But there's a ton of these different things on Unity's asset store. And what's even more cool about the asset store is that if you as a user create some cool assets or create scripts or anything that you can use in Unity that you think people will want because it's either hard to accomplish or confusing or you just don't think anybody's thought of it yet, you can actually put your stuff up on Unity's asset store for whatever price you want. Unity takes off like 5% or something when you sell, like Apple and Android does. But then you get the rest of the money. So it's pretty cool in that regard because a lot of students, especially in the college area, are obviously broke and have no money. And so if they're creative enough, they can they can create something within Unity that people might want to get, and they could get some extra income by doing that. I always found that to be pretty interesting because I haven't seen a game engine that really has something like this. So it's very heavily sort of crowdsourced, if you will. As far as learning Unity or getting involved with it, because it can definitely be intimidating when you first look at it, they have, I think actually they have them on the asset store here. They have their own set of projects that you can download. I think this is one of them. This one's called Boot Camp. This is like the original tutorial that Unity created when they released the engine. And this is free. And what you do is you can just download this and it gives you all the different prefabs, as they call them, and materials and things like that. And they include PDF documentation. And what this does is you can basically learn all the ins and outs of Unity just by going through these tutorials and using the things that they've given you here. And even beyond that, the amount of third-party support or just third-party tutorials for Unity is absurd. If you go to YouTube and just type in Unity 3D tutorial, you're going to find millions of videos. Whichever ones you like are fine for you. I tend to like the ones from 3D Buzz. Those are the ones I learned from. But I literally learned how to use this whole thing by watching YouTube videos. I did not mean to open Max. Anyway, and Unity offers quite a bit of documentation on their website, down to these different project files, and even down to their, say, like the API I was showing off earlier with MonoDevelop to help you learn the code. And even better is that game design is one of those fields that thrives heavily on collaboration. It's very rare that somebody makes an entire game all by themselves. It's happened. It's definitely happened for sure, but generally you have a big team of people working on something. And so when you're talking about a classroom setting or a school setting, it very much encourages that collaborative group project mentality. And, that's something that you find in the business world. That's something you find when you're out of high school, out of college, and you're actually working. You're always going to have to work with other people. And so it's a good way to teach students to interact with each other and, come together and solve common problems for something, create something that they want to create, and get that enjoyment out of it. On that same note, this works extremely well for support or for tutorials, because if you have a question about something, like most of the scripts I was writing for this quick demo I did, I would have a question about something. I would say, well, how do I get, this sound effect to work on my box so when I hit it, it makes a certain sound? So I would pretty much go to Google and literally type in how to add sound effect Unity 3D script, and there's like just a ton of different pages of people just saying, here's how you do it, here's how you do it, here's how you do it. And there's tons of different ways you can do it, but it's awesome because you get that freedom to just look around and find out the way that works best for you. And there's tons of people helping each other out, trying to figure this, trying to solve this common problem. Even on the internet, people hundreds of miles away from each other. It's real interesting just because game design is one of those fields where everybody seems to help each other out. So in terms of learning, it's very quick and easy to learn, just because of these resources that are available to you. As far as games that are made in Unity, they have a game list on their website. If you go to unity3d.com, you can pretty much find all this stuff out. It's under Gallery, made with Unity. You can pretty much see all the different games they make. A lot of the games that we see people are creating out of Unity are on the mobile devices, like the Android, the iPhone, Windows Phone, etc. However, you can still do PC, Mac, and Linux like some of these games. And if I if I go and I'll open up a different scene that's a little more pleasing to the eye. Except I don't think I have it in here. Oh, here we go. I think this is it. Let me see, let me play this. Okay, so this was like a thing I did just for a tutorial to learn my way around it. I created this terrain and added some fog and particle effects with snow falling, like a light source and trees and everything. I can walk around. I don't really do much. I can't shoot anything or anything like that. But if I wanted to build this out as a game, it's very easy in Unity. You simply just do build settings, and by default you can do the web player, which is what we saw on this guy's page here, something that you can embed on your website so you can show people. You can do PC, Mac, and Linux, and this pretty much handles all of the actual, what would you call it, assembly, I guess, of the code to work with these platforms. So you don't really have to do anything. You just create what's in Unity, and then you go into the build settings, and if you want to put it on Linux, you just say export to Linux, and it creates a Linux file for you that will work on Linux. You can also get Android exports. You can do Flash, Google, iOS 360, PS3, Wii. Some of these require specific licenses, and like the iOS, for instance, you have to do the Apple developer license and all that stuff to be able to do it. But it is very possible. You just probably have to go through some extra steps to get there. But yeah, by default, you can do PC, Mac, and Linux, the web player, and Flash. And it's very simple. If I wanted to do Windows, I'd say I'll do 64-bit. I'll go ahead and build and run it. I think it will be real quick, and I just save it on my desktop as asd.exe. Shouldn't take long, but it will build out like a 1080p version of this game for me. It'll be full screen and everything, and I mean, I don't really have much functionality to it, but I'm just trying to illustrate how easy this is to actually bring onto separate platforms, which I think is really cool, because if you are a game designer or even a student, you want to make sure your game is accessible to as many people as possible. And where's that at? My asset list. So yeah, a lot of the games are on the mobile devices, but we recently saw that Unity entered into an agreement with Sony. Apparently the PS4, the new one Sony's releasing, and their PS Vita and the PSP, their mobile devices, apparently they're all going to be compatible with the Unity SDK now. So the people at Unity are making a lot of good moves with a lot of big developers and big publishers to make sure that their engine is compatible across all these different hardware platforms. So compatibility, you don't really have to worry about much. This thing's going to work for pretty much anything and everything. And my thing is almost done. I'm lagging out. There we go. And so now it opens up for me, asks me what I want to do. I'll just do a 720p and I'll do the highest graphics. Hopefully I don't crash here. I've got a lot of stuff open. So this is an executable running on my desktop. I compiled the wrong one. I want to do my snow level, but whatever. So pretty much my stuff's running on my desktop right now. It's an executable file. If you were to do Mac, it'd be a DMG file. what's fun about this is that I can play test anything anywhere if I wanted. I could export this as an executable. I could throw it on a thumb drive, bring it to a friend's house and say, hey, how's this run on your computer? And you can play test different things and figure out, make sure that your game is working, all the way around in a decent way. Documentation, tutorials. So last thing I want to talk about real quick, because I had somebody bring up a question to me before. If I open up my test level again and I look at this level I'm on, this terrain, I created this within Unity. They have terrain assets and terrain toolkits that allow you to pretty much very easily create. Okay, so I just looked at my chat. John was telling me that Unity takes 20% from asset store purchases. So that's some clarification. Anyway, this terrain that I have here was created with the terrain toolkit, which allows me to basically, I don't really have to do anything. If you create a terrain in Unity by default, it's just this big old gray mesh that you see here that just showed up underneath my other terrain. But if I were to add my terrain toolkit to this, I'd be able to go under, say, a road and just choose something random here and apply a draw kind of erosion. Oh no, I'm under the wrong one. I want to go under create. There we go. Perlin. Go like rolling hills, generate Perlin terrain, and it automatically just starts creating this for me. And I can add textures to it if I want. I can add erosion to it to make it look more realistic. And you can go down. Maybe I like how this is and I just want to tweak it a bit. I could go under my terrain script. I could start lowering and raising terrain, and smoothing it out and things like that if I want more crevices or, so on and so forth. So the only reason I mention this is because somebody had asked me before if you can create levels within Unity rather than, say, Maya or Max. And that's mostly a question if you're on a limited budget and you don't have the 3D modeling software. Yes, you can create the models in Unity. You're just going to be a little bit more restricted in what you can accomplish, because obviously you're going to be able to get more, I would say, professional results or, industry standard results if you were to use Max or Maya versus using Unity 3D to do all your modeling. Well, now we got people saying Unity takes 30% off the asset store. I don't know exactly. I could probably find out real quick, but that's something a quick Google search would probably answer for you. Although 30 seems a bit high, but maybe. So I think overall, that's kind of just what I want to go over. I just want to get a very quick overview of this whole thing for people who may have not really utilized it before. I would say at this point, I'll go ahead and open it up to questions so I kind of stay on track here. Okay, so John linked, let's check those out. Our publishers keep, 70%, wow, okay. Oh, created by professionals. Huh. Okay, so I guess 30% is proper. All right. So that answers that. Anyway, yeah, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat menu. It's the second item from the left on your Join Me menu, and you should be able to chat to me, and I'll be able to answer hopefully most of your questions. Some of them I might not, but I could always get back to you later on them. I can give you my email. Yeah, so any questions at all? Again, I'm also recording this, so if you want to check it out later, we can send you the link. I've also created a quick 5-part Unity introductory tutorial for learning it that's a lot more in-depth than what I'm showing here, which is on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Studica News. So anybody have any questions about anything, about Unity, about education? I mean, not getting anything. No questions. Well, I'm going to say that's a first for me. I usually get a couple of questions. What is the best way to create avatars? Okay, so best way to create avatars, John, I'm assuming you mean like character models, like, models that you would control. I would definitely recommend 3D modeling software like Max or Maya. Those are pretty much the industry standards. Of course, you could use something, I think, like Rhino if you wanted. Unity is compatible with like a ton of different 3D modeling programs. As long as you can do like FBX exports, you're going to be perfectly fine. I would definitely recommend using an actual 3D modeling software. That's not to say you can't do it in Unity, but you're very limited with your tools here. Unity is much more for actually getting the mechanics of something down rather than the look and feel, or the look. The feel you can get down with Unity, but the look is something you'd want to do more with actually in Maya or Max, and you would want to handle the animations in there too. The other John also mentioned Poser, and it looks like you guys are conversating. So the other question I got from another John, what's your favorite place to find Unity assets outside the Unity Asset Store? That's a hard one because honestly, I haven't really gone looking too hard. I don't really know what other, asset places are out there. I mean, the fact that anybody can really create assets really means that anybody who runs a website or, uses Unity could really put their assets on the internet if they wanted. Whether or not they're compatible and things, I don't know. Those are things you would have to figure out. The Unity Asset Store is good just because it's verified by their publishers and everything. They make sure it all works and everything. If you go to like a third-party site, you might get something that was coded for or created for Unity, say 2.5, and you're using Unity 4. You're not sure if that's going to work or not. But I'm sure if you went on Google and you just looked up different Unity assets, I'm sure you would find a ton of different stuff. But I myself have not really gone looking. So I can't exactly answer that for you, unfortunately. John Bourne says turbosquid.com. That's an interesting name. Any other questions? Oh, and also like one last thing for everybody, if you are an educator or you work for a school and you're interested in something like Unity, first of all, you can download it from Unity's website and check it out if you want. It's free up front. You can get the download button here at the top right if you just go to unity3d.com and you want to play around with it and just see if it fits your needs. You can just download it for free. If you want the pro version, you would have to buy it, and it comes with more benefits, more functionality and things like that. Just as a note, the people I work for, Studica, we offer educational pricing on Unity, so you can find that on studica.com /Unity, I believe, if you're interested in actually purchasing. And the other cool thing about Unity, well, with the Unity licenses or the pro licenses, they also offer a commercial educational version, which a lot of software doesn't. I'm sure many of you know most educational software has some kind of watermark or something on it. It lets you know you can't use it for commercial purposes. Unity offers an educational, like, faculty / commercial license. So if you're at a school or whatever, you can actually get licenses that will allow you to take what you make and profit off of it if you want, even if you made it at school. So that's also pretty cool. I'm not getting any other questions here, so I guess I'll wrap this up. And if anybody has any questions that they want to ask me later, or they're interested in talking to somebody at my company about Unity or purchasing for their school, feel free to contact me at markp@studica.com. I just posted it in chat, so you guys can reach me there pretty much any time, and hopefully I can answer your questions, and we can just go from there. So I thank you guys for showing up, and hopefully the information was useful to you. And thank you. Have a good day.